Are you a businesswoman who is finding it challenging to get your ideas across and make a point? Welcome to Speakers Who Get Results with Elizabeth Bachman, a podcast dedicated to helping women get the visibility they want, whether making a speech or talking in a meeting. Every week, get valuable lessons from Elizabeth or learn from her roundtable conversations with experts and speakers on how to make a difference, not just a point. On to the show with your host, Elizabeth Bachman.
Hello, and welcome to Speakers Who Get Results. I'm Elizabeth Bachman, your host. This is the podcast where we talk about leadership, communication skills, presentation skills, and the various things you need to be a leader in this world. Before I get to our very interesting guest today, I'd like to invite you to see where your presentation skills are by taking our free 4-minute assessment at speakforresultsquiz.com. That's www.speakforresultsquiz.com. And that's where you can see where your presentation skills are strong and where perhaps a little bit of support could help you get the results you need and the recognition that you deserve. My guest today is Douglas Hardy. He's someone I've known for many years who works with very, very interesting people. And with his latest book, I said, okay, it's time. I've got to get you onto the podcast because he's a very articulate, interesting person. The official biography is that he is a business strategist and writer, specializing in the topics of human innovation and work collaboration. To date, he's written 18 books and numerous articles for industry and academic leaders, including Deloitte, Elkus, Manfredi Architects, WorkHuman, Monster.com, Bentley University, and Babson College, and many others. Previously, over the course of 20 years, he was the media executive at the New York Times, Random House, AT&T, New Media, and others. Currently, his writing appears under the client's bylines in Forbes, Fast Company, Inc., and other publications. Doug's recent areas of research include organizational culture, technology leadership, employee engagement, pandemic and post-pandemic workforce issues, workplace design, entrepreneurship, artificial intelligence applications in industry, and the employment economy. It's a lot, but that's because he's a really smart person who has a lot to say. And I am delighted to have gotten Doug Hardy onto Speakers Who Get Results. Now let's go to the interview. Hello, and welcome to Speakers Who Get Results. I am Elizabeth Bachman, your host, and today I have with me my dear friend, Douglas Hardy. Doug, actually. And we are going to talk about an awesome book. Before we do that, though, let me first invite you to see if you're curious where your presentation skills are working or not. You can take our free 4-minute assessment at speakforresultsquiz.com. That's www.speakforresultsquiz.com. And that's where you can see where your presentation skills are strong and where perhaps a little bit of support could get you the results you need and the recognition that you deserve. And if you score high enough, you will get a free 45-minute assessment with me. So, Doug, welcome to Speakers Who Get Results. I'm so glad I finally got you here.
It's great to be here, Elizabeth. Thank you.
Oh, well, we are happy to hear you. Douglas Hardy is a business strategist and a writer specializing in the topics of human innovation and work collaboration. To date, he's written 18 books, which blows my mind, and numerous articles for industry and academic leaders, including Deloitte, Elkus Manfredi Architects, WorkHuman, Monster.com, Bentley University, and Babson College. And previously, over the past 20 years, he's been a media executive at the New York Times, Random House, AT&T, New Media, and others. And currently, his writing appears under client bylines in Forbes, Fast Company, Inc., and other publications. His recent areas of research include organizational culture, technology, leadership, employee engagement, pandemic and post-pandemic workforce issues, workspace design, entrepreneurship, and artificial intelligence applications in industry and the employment economy. So, Doug Hardy, welcome to Speakers Who Get Results.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here.
How does it feel to listen to your bio being read?
I wonder how this guy had a minute to do anything else.
Yes,
but I will tell you a secret. I wrote that bio a couple of weeks ago for a client, and they had their PR person rewrite my bio. So that's somebody else's PR talking about me.
Well, that's good. You should never have to write your own. It's other people. We're always too close to our own material to really be objective about it.
So even the ghostwriter needs a ghostwriter, right?
Yes, exactly. And I should point out where it says that your writing has appeared in all those publications under client bylines. That's because you write things that appear under the name of your clients, right?
That's correct. Typically a CEO of a company with whom I've spent a lot of time. I think the longest relationship I've had now is going on 14 years with a CEO. So we can read each other's thoughts.
Yes, good. Well, I'm going to talk to you about ghostwriting on another episode. But today, I want to talk about this wonderful book, Who's in Your Room? I meant to have my copy in front of me so I could hold it up. There. Hold it up.
So happens.
There. Good. You have it next to your face. Good.
I've got it.
Yes. So tell us, how did this book come about and the two people who engaged you to help put it together?
A little bit of background here. Stuart Emery is a pioneer of the human potential movement. He was one of the dozen or so people back in the 70s who got it going. He was an intellectual leader there, but he was also an operational leader. He was the fellow who turned big organizations into working groups that could, with 100,000 members, but also 20 member cells of people practicing a lot of that human potential stuff. And Ivan Meisner is the founder of BNI, which is the world's largest business networking organization, Business Networks International, which your listeners should check out. It's absolutely terrific. And I've been a big believer in Ivan's ideas around how people should network for many years. In fact, I interviewed him 20 years ago for a book I wrote about how to network to find a job, because we agree a lot on principles. So for years, they presented the concepts in this book to various workshops, and they presented this central metaphor about your room, which we'll get to in a minute, to tens of thousands of people. And they wrote a short book a few years back that was kind of an expanded pamphlet explaining the ideas, and then people asked them to write a full-length book with stories that illustrated the principles, and especially with exercises, written exercises, so that people could make the program personal. A mutual friend put us together. He knew I did this, and we just hit it off. We got on one phone call and said, "Oh, we're going to have so much fun," and we spent dozens of phone calls just brainstorming and telling stories and kicking it around. And pretty soon, the format of the book came into my focus, and I wrote it using their words and mine.
That's wonderful. I love that. So this is a book about what's your 30-second explanation of what this book is about?
The book is a metaphor. And people have asked me, isn't this just one big metaphor? And I tell them, yeah, most religions are too, and most explanations for business processes and etc. Someone was once explaining, how does Warren Buffett do it? Well, it's like a snowball rolling down the hill. So we all use metaphors. The concept is this. Imagine you live your entire life in one room. It can be as big as you like. You get to design your room. But you live in this room, and this room has a door. Now, nothing's unusual about that, except there's one thing about this door that is unique. It says, enter only. There's no exit. Everybody you let into that room is going to be with you for the rest of your life. And this is a metaphor that's grounded in brain science. We don't really forget anything that happens to us. It all gets put in there somewhere. We can repress it. We can say we forgot, which means it's not top of mind. But every relationship, every meaningful relationship you've had in your life is a person in that room. Now, the question is, since they're never going to leave, who are you going to let in? Who are you going to keep out? Who do you have no choice about because you already let them in? Who do you want to let in? And also, where do they belong? Do they belong really close up next to you, or do they belong way in the back, maybe even locked up in a closet somewhere?
Okay.
The reason people asked for a book is that this metaphor, people go, oh yeah, I get it. But how do I apply that to my life? And that's what the book does.
So it gives you the exercises. Yes, it's a wonderful book. It's very useful. And I went through and I went, oh, that's a good way of thinking about it. The voices in my head talk to me all the time. So
we all know it. It's why won't those people leave me alone? I haven't seen them in 40 years.
Yes. Why am I still talking back to my mother? Yeah.
Right.
I particularly liked the concept of the doorkeeper and the concierge. Can you talk a little bit about who they are and what their functions are?
Sure. The doorkeeper functions as a character who lets people into your room or stops them at the door and says, sorry, no admittance. Or third possibility, you stay on the porch for a while, we'll see about it. Or a fourth possibility, you can come in, but you have to leave your baggage outside.
So the doorkeeper I like that. Yes.
Yeah. The doorkeeper chooses who comes into your life, and also, just as importantly, how they come into your life and with what. And the concierge metaphor is there's a upright concierge. I think of her as being a very proper, beautifully dressed woman in a $1,000 suit right there at the front, who tells people where they belong in my room. So some people are over in a corner called, that business relationship didn't really work out, but they're still here. I still remember them. The concierge just told them, you're back there. And there were other people who are very, very dear friends, and they're right up with me, right here in this room that is my life.
When we notice that, we probably unconsciously do this, but we don't actually think about who gets to come in and who doesn't, or where to put them. How can we use the metaphor of the doorkeeper, say? I particularly like the idea of leave your baggage outside. Something not always that good at. This is boundaries, basically, setting boundaries, right?
Right, exactly. I'll give you an example from last week. I presented this book at a terrific 3-day festival of books and authors up in Woodstock, Vermont. It's called Bookstock. It's every June. And a fellow came up to me afterward and said, "This is a really neat idea. I run an online group of seminars from a very prestigious nearby university. And would you consider doing it? And I said, sure, I'll consider it. And he went away to travel for the summer. And then he came back and last week said, okay, would you like to do this seminar? And I thought, I'm finishing a book. I'm writing a book now, finishing one up. And I'm traveling in the end of September. And I said to myself, I don't think this guy belongs in my room. We've had one conversation, but I don't want to have a relationship with him. Not that he's a bad guy, but I'm setting my own limits. I'd love to get the word out there, and I like teaching and so forth, but I have a bad habit of taking on too much. And so my doorkeeper just said, thanks very much. Maybe we'll talk later. Stay out there on the porch, but not right now.
Okay. I love that. I love that. What about when somebody comes in, the doorkeeper's on a break, and so you let somebody in and they've brought their baggage with them? Talk about that a little bit.
Oh, boy.
Especially for our international listeners, you've all experienced this, but maybe you haven't experienced with these words before. So explain a little bit more about how that goes.
Well, baggage is someone's life experiences or points of view or habits that they carry with them. We all do. But they want other people to pick it up and carry it around too. Here's an example. I have a friend, good friend, just saw her recently. And her particular piece of baggage is that she likes to gossip. And she likes to gossip in that way that we all know. Do you know the sort of person who says something negative about someone else very intimately to you as if you agree? Oh, you know her. She's really boring, right? Well, I like this person. She can come into my room. But when she tries to get me to agree with gossip, I change the subject or I ignore it or I turn it away. She's welcome in my room, but her baggage isn't. And I'm just alert to that. Now, a lot of this book is about the people who have found their way into your room. Relatives and bad bosses come to mind.
Yes.
Where you don't have a choice. They're already in there. And how do you manage them? And there are many, many ways to manage them. If we have time, I'll go to probably my favorite page in the book, page 121, where we talk about a dozen ways to say no without sounding like a jerk.
Oh, that's my next question, actually. So, but let me just, the couple of thoughts about that is, it makes me think of people who've been through either a bad boss or a bad relationship that's broken up. The classic story is someone who's gone through a divorce, and then the next 2 or 3 people they're dating, they're trying to replay the old relationship. And that happens in business. I have two different clients, 2 different companies now, where the person I'm working with is dealing with baggage, their boss's baggage from a previous company. The boss had a terrible experience with someone in her position in their previous company, and so they don't trust her. And part of what we're working on is how to, without actually saying, I am not your previous manager, to just say, see me for who I am, and please don't replay that horrible experience here. And the hard part is that he's not aware.
Right.
So actually that was one of my other questions. Once you understand this concept, is there any way to get somebody else, when you see someone else going into a pattern and you say, I think that's what's happening, can you tell them? Is it possible?
Well, of course, it depends on the degree to which they're willing to let you in, right?
Okay.
But one of the best ways to handle a situation like that is to be genuinely curious. Don't assume you know the answer.
Mm-hmm.
So you're familiar with a construction of setting boundaries, which is you say, when you say this, I feel that. So
Mm-hmm.
you keep the focus on yourself. So we're talking a little abstract here, but let's say that you have a boss who learned elsewhere not to trust people.
Mm-hmm.
You can say, I appreciate you checking in with me on this project. Do you need more than one update a week? You don't have to, you're not their shrink, but you can go to their behavior and say, you seem to need a lot of updating on this project. Is something bothering you? Is there a particular concern you have? You know, one of the things that works that we don't do enough in business is being genuinely curious about the other person.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in relationships where someone else has a certain degree of power over us, we tell ourselves stories based on our previous experience about what they think and what they're doing. They might not even know what they're doing or how they're reacting to something in the past. But by being genuinely curious about why they're behaving in a certain way, and I mean, you don't have to say, I'm genuinely curious, but if you take that kind of open point of view and then engage them in conversation about specifics of behavior,
Mm-hmm.
then if you're willing to be surprised, you might find out someone who says, oh, golly, I've always needed 3 updates a week. Say, well, would 2 be okay? Or should we change the format or so forth? Because you'll never get anywhere if you tell somebody you've got trust issues because of people you worked with before.
Yeah,
You're
right.
not their shrink. It's not that. It's focusing on your feelings and your interactions. It's hard to find a word, but open-mindedness is really it.
Mm-hmm.
That there could be a lot of explanations for behaviors. For one thing, most people respond well to someone else being empathetic.
Mm-hmm.
And for another, you get to find out if they're at all mature enough to give you an honest answer, you get to find out better where you stand.
Yeah.
And they might say, oh, your last 3 updates were too long or weren't accurate, or your projections didn't work last year. They were off by 20%. And you say, oh, well, let's talk about how the projections can become more accurate.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting back to the reason that exists between the two of you instead of a whole bunch of static and noise that you can't do anything about.
Well, and it's a very good point that we also bring our own baggage. So I've certainly been all too many times in my life been in places where I'm interpreting what someone did according to what I'm afraid they might be thinking, which actually wasn't what they were thinking at all.
Right.
Classic example is if you're talking to a group and there's someone who in the front row who's frowning, and my voices will always say, oh, they hate it, they're not talking to me, where it just might be I'm speaking English and it's not their first language, so they're concentrating. That's one that took me a long time to learn. Then since you mentioned it, let's go to how do you say no without being a jerk? Page 121, you said, yes?
Yes, I'll read a paragraph and then I'll give you a couple of the reasons. A couple of the ways to speak. Someone wants to come into your room, or someone's already there and wants to come up close to you, and you're thinking, oh, no, you don't. You might want to say it aloud, but the trouble is, then they think you're a jerk, or worse. Now you are opponents. You're trapped in the room together and butting heads. And they're going to get all defensive and so forth. So instead of saying, hell no, or go away, here are 13 examples we give. I'll just give you a couple of my favorites. This is from Ivan Meisner, and it's his favorite. Tell them, If I said yes to you, I'm afraid I'd let you down. I want you to succeed, and I can't do this for you as well as someone else. If they're already in your room, a family member, for example, you can name their baggage and have the concierge take it outside.
Mhm.
I know you had a difficult relationship with dad, but we've talked about this before. And if you want to talk about a difficult relationship with dad, I can do that. But I had a good relationship with dad, and I don't think you need to characterize him in that way.
Mhm.
That's a way to say, no, I'm not going to have this conversation where I agree with you that dad's a jerk.
Mhm.
Here's another thing you can say. I'll listen to what you have to say, but when the discussion is over, the answer will almost certainly be no. That's what to say when a relative or a friend asks for money.
Good. Okay.
And I'll read one more. Oh, this is important. Ivan and Stuart both use the term Seinfeld as a verb. Don't Seinfeld the situation. If you remember the television show Seinfeld, characters would always go off on some crazy, complicated subterfuge or ruse to get out of conflict, and they'd end up getting into more trouble than they got into to begin with, right?
Mhm.
You can be polite and still be direct. Don't try to make up a reason that doesn't exist, because you will just get drawn into a doom loop,
Oh,
a
yes.
whirlpool of greater difficulties.
Uh-huh.
And there are at least 7 other ways to say no in the book.
That's great. It's good to have an example so that you can look at it and just say, oh yeah, okay, I could use that there. Um, I want to expand though, then to you mentioned the grenade thrower. This is also parts of saying no, or how not to get stuck on the grenade. Uh, what's the concept of the person who's throwing a grenade?
Well, the grenade thrower is the person who comes to Thanksgiving dinner and right when everybody gathers says something just horrible. Something about somebody or about the situation, or mom always loved you best, or everybody knows that you're a liar, or just tries to blow up the whole room. The grenade thrower wants attention.
Mm-hmm.
Grenade thrower wants to control the room. The grenade thrower has been waiting all year to make this big disruption. So there are 2 ways to deal with it. The first way is to agree with other people in advance. And it doesn't have to be a big secret, but just agree that you'll go, okay. And then just go back to your conversation. In other words, it sounds simplistic, but don't take the bait. Just ignore it.
Uh-huh.
The second way, typically a grenade thrower will persist and try to leverage often one person. Don't you agree? Then you have to structure a conversation. Back to the, when you say this, I feel that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't agree. So I'm going to ignore this remark from now. We will discuss it. I'm not going to discuss it here and now. What you're trying to do is diffuse the group situation. If you want to discuss it later, I will do that with you.
Mm-hmm.
But again, my answer will probably be no. If you want to have an open and honest and direct conversation, we can have it later.
Mm-hmm.
Main thing to do is you call out the meta message, which is the grenade thrower is asserting the right to take over the room and disrupt a situation. Now, They will often try to push back and say, you just can't handle the truth. Yeah. Or I'm just doing this, or I'm just doing that.
What's the matter? Can't you take a joke?
Right. When you hear the term, what's the matter? Can't you take a joke? Or when you hear the term, if you would just, it is never just. It is always more. And the decision you have, they've set it up. The decision you have is whether you give them control of the room, literally and metaphorically, or you take that control back.
This is,
Go on.
I was just going to say, this is the sort of thing that happens. I talk about with my clients who are female leaders. Why quite often there is someone younger in their department or in their meetings who's doing their best to disrupt things or distracting or take them away from the topic off onto a tangent.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had a couple of clients the last couple of years who have had active saboteurs in their departments, people who are doing their best to make the boss give up and quit so that they can take over the position, basically.
Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So learning how to not take the bait is a hard one. And that's one for me. I want allies. I want allies who are going to back me up, because that's the sort of thing it's hard to do on your own. Hard to do on your own when someone suddenly undermines you. Maybe once you've got some practice, but learning how to do that, I want allies. Do you have any tips for that?
Yeah, in fact, I'll recommend a book. It's a classic and it's very, very good. It's called Difficult Conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to have the difficult conversation with that person about the fact that, one, you're the boss.
Mm-hmm.
You have those responsibilities. Two, you expect a certain kind of behavior. And if they can't conform to that, or if they don't want to do that behavior, I'm not talking about someone's different gifts or different styles. I'm talking about being open and honest and direct rather than subterfuge.
Mm-hmm.
And that conversation is best done privately,
mm-hmm.
because the person who in public is trying to undermine you is counting on you not having a confrontation. On the one hand, you not having a public confrontation.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, you not having a private confrontation.
Right.
Because you want to be a good boss. I mean, they're leveraging your good intentions. Or they have something to say to you that's
Mm-hmm.
important. And you need to take that offline out of the group, go out to lunch and say, when you do this, I think it's undermining the group. Talk to me about why you're doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And then be open-minded, but also be very firm about what behavior you expect and why you have the right to assert it.
Yes, right. I find actually often that I hear the word, I outrank him. Why is he taking over? Why is he trying to take over?
Mm-hmm.
And the way I hear it is my client, female client, would be on the organizational chart, outranks the person who's disrupting the meetings, who's trying to take credit for the idea. But and it is seen in a totally different way by the disruptor.
Right.
By the disruptor who says, "Oh, there's a really cool idea. It's good," and it's also the idea that the person who outranks them is already working on, and it just, how do you stop them without shutting? I think sometimes there's always a matter of degree. There are people to whom if you glance sideways at them, they will crumple. And there are other people who sometimes you have to hit them over the head before they get it. And that's always a tricky dance.
Well, it's when we talk about being open and honest and direct, that's a consciousness raising exercise. You may
Mm-hmm.
be dealing with someone who is oblivious,
Mm-hmm.
someone who is really enthusiastic, someone who is pushing your own insecurity buttons,
Mm-hmm.
someone who represents a threat, or somebody who doesn't represent a threat but feels like it because your conditioning and his conditioning are quite different. We're all still working our way through this ocean of power relationships, whether that's based on sex, whether that's based on race, whether that's based on where we are in the hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the hardest things to do, and I think many of your listeners will be familiar with Brene Brown, but I'd go back to her because she talks very, very lucidly about group dynamics and how people's not only conditioning, but people's fears and self-images feed negative cycles of conversation. When we talk about a metaphor like who's in your room, we're really just trying to cast a clear light on what is often a murky situation. And that's the helpful thing about a metaphor.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Well,
and I think it's just to repeat, I think whether the person you're dealing with is oblivious or purposeful, I think we make a lot of trouble for ourselves when we misattribute motivations.
And when we assume they have a motivation that is not actually the motivation.
Right. It's resonating with something you've had in the past. Look, we've all had bad bosses, right?
Yeah.
Oh, this one's just like Bob and he was a jerk.
Yeah.
Well, it's not just like Bob. He's a whole different person.
Right.
Might be behaving like Bob. He might even be behaving like Bob for the reasons Bob behaved that way. But when you're up in your head having the whole conversation, instead of having the conversation with another person, you're just perpetuating the problem.
Yeah. These are the lie awake at 3:00 in the morning, worrying about something and then making up stories. Yes.
We've all done it.
We've all done it. Indeed. Well, Doug Hardy, it has been so much fun to have you here. And I'm really excited. It's a wonderful book. Who's in the room? I'll hold it up one more time for the sake of our viewers, if you will.
Who's in your room? You will see the same title on an short orange covered book. That's not this book. That's the way titles go. Amazon still has a short sort of pamphlet size version of this, but the blue cover is the revised and updated with all the stories and exercises version of Who's in Your Room.
Great. It's wonderful. It's easy to read. It's full of useful information. Doug, if there's one thing, someone's listening to this and say, oh, they're speaking my language, I need it. What can you do first? What's one thing that our listeners can do if they don't have access to go buy the book right now?
Think about the metaphor. Sit down for 5 minutes, close your eyes, and imagine you live in this room. And everybody who you've ever let in, everybody with whom you've had a relationship is in there. Some people are close, some people are far away, but they're all behaving according to their own characters and their own experience. So who do you want close and who do you want way in the back and far away, and why?
I love it. Thank you so very much, Doug Hardy, for joining us on Speakers Who Get Results. This has been Speakers Who Get Results. I'm Elizabeth Bachman, your host. If you enjoyed this conversation, first of all, go buy the book. We'll put the information in the show notes. And also tell your friends, subscribe to us on whatever podcast app you're listening. Subscribe to us on YouTube as well. There's lots more stuff on the YouTube channel. And spread the word so that we can get more information out to the people who need it. This has been Speakers Who Get Results. I'm Elizabeth Bachman. I'll see you on the next one.
We have just concluded another great episode of Speakers Who Get Results with your host, Elizabeth Bachman. If you got value from today's episode, please feel free to share us with your friends and colleagues. You may also visit elizabethbachman.com for additional resources. Be sure to tune in every week for new episodes, and thanks for tuning in.